talk about what you can do in case your customer complains about that pitcher not filling with water, or they may get some kind of an error code or something along those lines, all right? So the first thing, in order for that autofill feature to work, it has to be activated, right? The customer has to go into the control panel and manually activate the feature. You don't have to use it, but if the customer wants to use it, they have to activate it. So that's number one. The second thing is your installation, okay? Very, very important that the refrigerator is not leaning forward, all right? And the reason for that, as you'll see here, is because the pitcher, right? If it's leaning forward, it's going to activate this switch over here, which basically tells the refrigerator that the pitcher is full of water. So let me explain how that works. When we put the pitcher in, and this is an empty pitcher, right? It doesn't have any water in there. It is slightly tilted back, but when this fills with water, gravity is sort of going to push it to the front. And when it's pushed toward the front, of course, it's going to activate that switch we just took a look at, and that's going to tell the microprocessor that it is filled with water. So needless to say, if the refrigerator is tilted forward and that pitcher is pushing against that switch, then of course the refrigerator is not going to fill the pitcher with water. So that's the second thing, the installation, all right? The other thing you want to make sure is that you advise your customer is how they position this top cover, okay? So when they want to, clean it or wash this, okay? Obviously, they're going to take it apart, wash it, do whatever they need to do, and then they're going to piece it back together, and of course, put the pitcher back in its location, right? The problem is that sometimes the customer may assemble this incorrectly. Like they'll put it backwards like this, and of course, it'll still fit, all right? But now it's not going to fill with water, all right? It's not going to fill, and the reason for that is because, when we put it back the right way, all right, if we open this up, over here you can see that there's a little magnet, right? And that magnet aligns with a reed switch on the refrigerator that basically tells the refrigerator the pitcher is in its location. If the customer puts this backward, right? Now that reed switch, which is supposed to be in this location, it's over here. So now you can put the pitcher inside, but the refrigerator is going to think that there's no pitcher in there. So of course, no pitcher, it's never going to fill with water. All right, so that's another thing. Customer has to make sure that they put that cover back on correctly. All right, and the last thing I want to talk about is an error code that they might get, a 76C error code. And this will typically happen when there's some sort of leak. So we're going to disassemble this in a little bit. I'll show you how to disassemble it. But basically, when this is leaking water, all right, to prevent the refrigerator from flooding, there are two little pins at the bottom that, of course, are going to detect the water. And if there's water, any moisture down there, right, then you're going to get that 76C error code. So before we get into that, let's go ahead and take a look at how to disassemble this, all right? Begin by removing the autofill pitcher and the top shelf. Carefully detach the ice chute gasket. Remove one screw. And detach the autofill cover. Remove the case guard screw and carefully detach it. Using a small flathead, remove the plastic cap and remove the screw. Disconnect the wire harness. Remove the screw holding down the water valve assembly and detach it. Now, carefully detach the autofill case assembly Use a small flathead to press on the John Guest fittings and carefully detach both hoses. Finally, remove the entire auto case assembly. Okay, my friends, so as you can see, to remove this, it's not that difficult. Okay, I'll show you a couple different steps here and a couple tips, right, about how to make it easier on yourself whenever you're disassembling this. All right, so now that it is apart, let's take a look at that little 2-pin sensor that I talked about before that detects moisture, okay? So again, in case there's some sort of leak in this area, what's gonna happen is the water is gonna flow toward the back, and it's going to collect in this little chamber over here, okay? So I'm just going to pull out the sensor over here. You see those two little pins? I'm not sure if the camera can pick it up, but these two little pins right over here will short out with the water, and that'll basically tell the microprocessor in the refrigerator that some water has leaked over here, okay? So what you'll need to do, obviously, is find out why it's leaking. It could be several reasons. One of the main reasons the pitcher may leak is because if the customer puts this thing into the dishwasher, it's going to warp, and of course it's not going to make a tight seal, it'll eventually leak. So that's very important. Advise your customers only to hand wash this. Never ever put it in the dishwasher. We get a lot of complaints about that, okay? So again, going back to this, all right, if you get some sort of moisture in here, you're going to get a 76C error code, and of course at that point, there's really nothing to replace. The first thing you have to do is just make sure that there's no water in here, okay? Also, you see this little rubber cap over here? This is to allow the water to drain out. Make sure that before you leave the customer's home, this is put back in place. Otherwise, what's going to happen is the water, if you leave it open and it leaks, it's going to collect all in here. The customer's going to complain about water. Instead of in their crisper drawers over there, it's going to be water over here, okay? So that's a whole nother ballgame. All right, so very, very important. Now, the last thing I want to talk about before we move on is the service tip that our product support team has come up with, okay? So when you order this, this pitcher or this, the case assembly, this Autofill assembly, what's going to happen is it's going to come with a protective cover, almost like a piece of foil that's going to be protecting these two little pins over here, okay? Unfortunately, if you forget to remove that foil, it's like a foil, if you forget to remove it, the refrigerator is always going to think that this is shorted out. In other words, it's always going to think that there's some sort of leak in there, and when you reinstall everything, it's going to give you a 76C error code. So very, very important that when you order one of these things brand new, you remember to remove that foil from the sensor, okay? Very, very important, all right? So now let's, last minute things that I just want to tell you about. So here's obviously your water valve. Your reed switch is going to be right over here. So when you put that pitcher, right? Again, it's going to sort of mate with the magnet and the reed switch, and that'll tell the refrigerator that the pitcher has been installed. Again, if the customer flips this cover the other way, right, then when they put it in, the refrigerator is going to think that there's no pitcher in there, and of course it's not going to fill with water. So very, very important. Also, check to see that that push button is actually working, okay? Make sure that it is springing back, because if it doesn't, then again, the refrigerator will think that the pitcher is full of water, and of course, that's not going to allow it to really, truly fill with water, all right? So that's basically it, my friends. Not too difficult. In case you get any kind of electrical failure here, of course, just order this assembly. Now, if you replace this, for example, and you still have some kind of issue, the other thing I would check is, of course, your connector over here, your door connection. You may have the water not connected properly, or you might have some sort of cable issue. All right, so make sure that everything underneath that hinge plate cover is totally 100% correct. All right, so that's basically it, my friends. That's how you troubleshoot this.